The Trump administration published its new national security strategy Friday, and it's already been ruffling a few feathers, especially here in Europe. The document took aim at the European continent, calling the EU overregulated, lacking in self-confidence, and facing civilizational erasure due to immigration. Reacting to the criticism, the EU's foreign policy chief said Washington was still Europe's main ally and that as allies they should both stick together.
You know, U.S. is still our biggest ally, and there I read it as well that we are still the biggest ally, and it's in the interest of United States as well that Europe lasts, and that we are really still the ally and working together for these things. I think we haven't always seen eye to eye on different topics, but I think the overall principle is still there. We are the biggest allies and we should stick together.
For more on this, I'm joined on set by our Foreign Affairs editor, Kedivan Gorjestani. Kedivan, lovely to have you back on set with us. So when you look at this national security strategy, is Kaja Kallas right to say that the U.S. is still an ally of Europe?
Well, it sounds more like wishful thinking from Kaja Kallas, because when you read the national security strategy, at the very least, it shows that the U.S. is very seriously questioning whether or not they are still aligned with the Europeans. And that alone is a radical reorientation of U.S. Foreign policy, instead of focusing, as it has in the past, whether it was Joe Biden, or Donald Trump in his first term, the U.S. and the strategy is focusing not on threats from China or threats from Russia, but focusing on going after and criticizing these so-called allies, the Europeans, of course. The document, of course, does call, for example, for a quick end to the war in Ukraine, and calls for efforts to sort of avoid a broader confrontation between the Europeans and the Russians. But it is light on words against the Russians, and instead is saying that the Europeans have unrealistic sort of expectations for the Ukraine war. But I think that the most striking of quotes from that strategy refers to the NATO alliance and the future of the NATO alliance. In it, it says, over the long term, it's more than plausible that in a few decades at the latest, certain NATO members will become majority non-European. It is an open question whether they will view their place in the world or their alliance with the U.S. in the same way as those who signed the NATO charter. So what you see there is that the U.S. is not only calling into question the future adhesion of European nations to the NATO alliance, but also in doing so, they're doing it by summoning, not so subtly, a very racist great replacement theory, the theory which claims that white Europeans are deliberately being replaced by non-whites in this case. There is an ending to that quote which says, the continent will be unrecognizable in 20 years or less, according to the Americans.
Wow, that's pretty shocking there. But it's not the first time the Trump administration has talked about Europe being a civilization in decline. What are some of the other issues that the U.S. has been flagging up?
Well, anyone who remembers that now infamous speech by the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, in front of the Munich Security Forum in February will not be surprised by the words that are in this national security strategy. What the United States is doubling down on in the strategy is its accusations, especially against the European Union member states. They're accusing the Europeans of undermining political liberty and sovereignty, of failing to curtail immigration, censoring free speech. Of course, we've seen that happen over and over again from the Americans, saying that the Europeans are trying to curtail free speech and not and censoring speech in the bloc, but also suppressing political opposition. So the U.S. is not completely giving up on Europe because it knows that it is an important economic bloc and partner, saying that it cannot afford to lose Europe. But so they're saying that we need to help Europe correct its current trajectory. How do they intend on doing that? By cultivating resistance within Europe, adding that American diplomacy should stand up for unapologetic celebration of European nations, individual characters and history, and welcoming the influence of patriotic European parties. This, again, not surprising when you follow the Trump administration. They have for a long time been supporting the far-right parties, leaders around Europe, the AfD in Germany, Viktor Orban in Hungary, and even Marine Le Pen and her party here in France. But really what you're seeing there is that this is now an actual strategy that they're putting forward in a 30-page plan.
Well, that's thank you so much for that analysis. That's France 24's Ketevan Gorjistani, our international affairs editor.